So in 75 we got a special licence, an experimental licence, which meant we could play music and we could have all of these people talking on the radio doing their own thing, which was radical as in its time.
Radio Adelaide has a great deal of resource around it, not necessarily always financial resource, but intellect. You've got people who have been doing this for years. You've got people who are really supportive. You've got that genuine community feel.
I did a media degree. Tom also did a media degree. And I don't know if I would be really anywhere if it wasn't for Radio Adelaide.
When we started in the 70s, there were 5 stations in Adelaide. There were probably 6 or 7 in Melbourne and Sydney, and they had been there since the 1930s. You were either an ABC station or a commercial station. We come along and we're the beginning of the flourishing of community radio. At this stage there is no community radio. There's no station in Australia, and the University of Adelaide has been given a grant of $100,000 anonymously to start an adult education station. So it starts with a fairly narrow brief, but that's where we start. We were not alone in the world. There was a movement for community radio, public radio, all over the place. If you go back to Britain, say, the BBC has been there since it was invented, and they're starting to think about local radio at least. There are pirate radio stations wanting to play music and, doing it from a ship in the channel. So there's an attempt to break out. In America, there are stations, again quite limited like they offered us, which are doing agricultural education for farmers in the Midwest. They were run out of universities, so we had a couple of models to look at, but very limited. So we looked at that and we began with 12 hours a week. And by the time we were getting a couple of years in, other things are happening as they were around Australia. People wanted to broadcast, members of the community, ethnic groups, people that we take for granted now, over 60s radio for the print handicap. They didn't exist either, and we're starting to get the nibbles about that and saying, what can we do? So we applied for a community licence which gave us a lot more freedom. So in 75 we got a special licence, an experimental licence, which meant we could play music and we could have all of these people talking on the radio doing their own thing, which was radical as in its time.
It's gone on since then to expand into lots of different things, but still with an educational focus. We still operate on an educational licence today. Programming is probably very different to what it was in 1972, surely, but still with that same intention of being informative and delivering programming that allows people to get engaged in education in all sorts of different ways.
We're focused on music, arts and ideas, and hearing them from voices not usually heard within the media. And so I think that's one of the really important things, to have that diversity of media that's also being produced by people with lived experience. So for example, we have Destigmatised, which is a show that's produced by people with disabilities, and also with all of our First Nation programming, it's produced by people who are able to talk about the issues that are relevant to them rather than be talked about, which we so often hear in other media.
خانم آقایان، دوستان و شنوندگان بسیار عزیز و گرامی، سعادتی است که بار دیگر از فرستنده رادیو ادلید در سواحل زیبای جنوب کشور استرالیا یکی دیگر از برنامه‌های سروش دوست هدیه جامعه بهایی را تقدیم کنیم. من خسرو آزادگان هستم که تا پایان وقت در خدمت شما خواهم بود. My name is Keith Azadagan. My program that I work here in Radio Adelaide is Call of the Beloved. It's a Persian program for the Baha'i community of South Australia. Goes back to 2001 when for the first time I started working with Radio Adelaide. I had a course here for about 3 or 4 months. I became a panel operator for radio. And that time there was a program called Persian Cultural Program for Persian community, Farsi speaking people. But while I was working in that radio program, I started another program, the one that at the moment is still running, called Call of the Beloved, and also the program on Channel 44 that is called the same, Call of the Beloved. I don't exactly know how many, but around 4,000 to 5,000 Farsi-speaking people are Baha'is in South Australia. I myself came to Australia in 1985, actually the time that Radio Adelaide started. And I had a background in radio and television in Iran. And I was really shocked and surprised that there is a radio station established in Adelaide for communities. I came from a country, media, radio and television, even newspapers and everything is under control of government. And people are not allowed to talk about their own belief, whatever is not the same as the authority belief. The involvement in Radio Adelaide not only is important to me, that every person from community, some people like me, we speak English because this is the language of this land, but my mother language is Farsi, Persian, and many others. This is very important. We come to a country, they're advertising for unity in diversity. There are more than 200 different nationalities in this city, and everyone has got right to come to this radio and other community access radio and televisions to express themselves. This is great. We don't have such things in many parts of the world.
We have over 200 volunteers involved mainly in programming, broadcasting, but also in making digital content and other off-air roles. And they're integral to the running of the station. We simply couldn't produce the amount of content that we do without volunteers. You know, whether that's for telling listeners about the latest in bluegrass music from around the world, or current affairs, or social justice issues, or indigenous languages, whatever that might be.
So Her is a show that is a women identifying and gender non-binary music focused program. So each week I try to have a local female or gender non-binary artist on to chat and see what she's up to, and talk about what songs she loves from other gender non-binary or female artists.
So Adelaide's Heaps Good is a show that I also pitched around the same time when I first started. It was kind of comedy-based program based around the idea of it being Adelaide focused, but it's not really entirely Adelaide focused. We talk about weird food, we talk about dog news, all these things, but sort of through vaguely an Adelaide lens.
I started at Radio Adelaide in 2017 during uni. I did my placement here and never left.
I started in Radio Adelaide in 2015 through the University of Adelaide, doing the student program that they had at the time, and then started producing on the breakfast show not long after that, and have been sort of hanging around it ever since. Community broadcasting, it's really the only thing that's given an opportunity. I first started doing community radio when I was 18, even before Radio Adelaide, and I did that for about 6 to 8 months, and it's just a chance for you to get experience. There's nothing else like it, really.
Yeah, it's really important. I wouldn't have had any opportunities. I don't know how, honestly, I did a media degree, Tom also did a media degree, and I don't know if I would be really anywhere if it wasn't for Radio Adelaide.
I'm Sarah Martin and I'm the producer of The Wire, which is a current affairs program. It's a national current affairs program which is broadcast across community radio. So it's produced in Sydney on Mondays and Tuesdays, Adelaide Wednesdays and Thursdays, and in Brisbane on Fridays. I did my journalism degree and part of that was a news broadcasting element. So I got involved at Radio Adelaide by doing news reading here, which I'm not a morning person. I don't do mornings, but I was happily getting out of bed at 3 a.m. to get down here to produce bulletins for no pay because I love it. And so I did news bulletins for a few years and then also started volunteering on The Wire because it's predominantly a volunteer-driven program with producers that sit across the top of it. And so I volunteered there for another couple of years and then ultimately got the job as the producer, which was great. Radio Adelaide has a great deal of resource around it, not necessarily always financial resource, but intellect. You've got people who have been doing this for years. You've got people who are really supportive. You've got that genuine community feel. There's a real sense of commitment and sharing to the product that you're trying to put out. So I guess in terms of turning that into what I do externally, it's given me a real understanding of how to support and mentor, how to also be persistent and find the story that's the real story. If someone wants to get involved at Radio Adelaide, they just need to turn up. But in general, in Radio Adelaide, you can start assisting with the breakfast show and producing. You can start reading news bulletins and understanding how to do that properly and develop your skills. And there's a skills pathway and it's practical, it's real, and what you get out at the end is something that you can turn around to prospective external employers and say, I have actual real world skills here, instead of, I know the concepts, how do I apply them? And so we're really welcoming. It feels a bit daunting when you walk in the first time or even the first few times until you know a few faces, but once you do, it's a really great place to be.
Well, my name is Julie Francis and I've been retired for 11 years, and in the last 7 years I've been working on the program at Radio Adelaide called Roundabout, which is a 2-hour program from Monday to Friday run by volunteers from Radio for the Third Age, and usually for 2 hours each day 2 people present beautiful music and also interview a guest and give some information that's helpful to older people. So it's basically for older people and it's run by older people. And then the other program that I do, I started almost 12 months ago, and that's called Nostalgia. It's music for people who are older, obviously, and it's music I play from the 1920s right through to the 1970s, and I sometimes squeeze in a couple of 1980s and 90s, which is a bit naughty because I know that's not really nostalgia, although looking at 20 years ago I guess you could call that nostalgia. The response that I've had has given me inspiration to keep going, and because I do it as a volunteer, there's a lot of work that goes into it. I spend work at home preparing the program, probably about 4 hours gathering the music, looking at the research that enables me to talk about where the music came from and who sings it and what movies they were in, and then I present the program. And because Saturday is fairly quiet in the Radio Adelaide station in terms of people being around, the phone calls come through into the station, and I've had increasing numbers of calls coming in and these lovely delightful people ringing up telling me their stories. And I've had a few that have actually made my eyes a bit misty, and now I have a little following of people who ring up and say, hello, I'm Ken from Camden Park, or I'm Elaine from the Hills, I'm Pat from Salisbury North, and I now know what sort of music they like. They tell me what they like me to play. One of the lovely stories that I remember, a lady from West Lakes called Josie, an English lady, told me in response to my question, when you hear music or hear a song, what do you remember, or what buttons does it push? And I played the day before Anzac Day most of the war songs that people remembered, and one of them was We'll Meet Again, Vera Lynn singing it. And this lady called Josie said, I remember that song because when I was 24 years old, I left England with my husband and 3 children, and I left all my family behind, and I didn't know what country I was coming. I knew I was coming to Australia, but I didn't know what the country was going to be like. And as the ship sailed away from the wharf, all the people on the wharf waved and sang We'll Meet Again. So she said, whenever I hear Vera Lynn singing We'll Meet Again, I think of that ship leaving the wharf and all those people waving and singing We'll Meet Again.
My name's Roland Neagle and I'm part of Subatomic, which is a science show where we sort of distill all the really complicated bits that have come out in the last week or so of science and try and put it across in an entertaining and informative manner. It was primarily Jack's idea, and he was doing a science degree at the time, doing a majoring in chemistry, and I was doing an arts degree, which is a bit funny because you don't really associate the arts with science, but they're pretty interconnected. So I was majoring in screen and media and sociology, and I was kind of trying to approach it as like the critical voice, someone who can sort of hear a science word and go, I have no idea what that means. I want you to help me break that down. And I think it worked out for the first couple of years. I was that person who just was curious and wanted to know more, but didn't necessarily know everything there is to know. And as I sort of continued the show, I became less and less that person and more of someone who sort of takes the jargon for granted and might need to, well, slow down here. I need to tell people actually what this means. There's so many different kinds of shows that we have here at Radio Adelaide. It's not just your typical drive home sort of, we're just replaying 500 miles again. It's got that level of understanding between cultures. It's got that understanding of different people and their viewpoints. It definitely gives access to an array of different cultures and subcultures. I remember there was a funding drive for one of the programs, and they needed to raise $2,000 because they were like an important voice for members of their communities. And so when they did a phone call fundraiser, they managed to raise $2,000 in like one show. And that just goes to show how important that program is to those people. And I just feel that's one of the mainstays of community radio. It gives voices to people who don't necessarily have that access. Got that level of understanding between cultures. It's got that understanding of different people and their viewpoints and how that sort of emerges in just like the social fabric that might not exactly be acknowledged in the mainstream media, but at least gives that level of acknowledgement, as well as just being a absolutely cultural menagerie.
Community radio and Radio Adelaide give the community a voice, I think. It sounds a little bit twee just saying that, but it's truly the value in it. You can come in here and have people who are from the University of the Third Age putting on records and playing songs from the 50s, and they're lovely, genuinely enjoying that moment that they get to share something they love. You have people who are deeply into politics or feminism, and they've got their opportunity to pull together a story and tell that story and share their ideas, you know. And it's, what you need to know is that those people who are doing that are members of our community. There are people just who want to go and share ideas, and this Radio Adelaide's a real ideas station. So it's quite unique in that it's not just reacting to the weird things that are going on in the world right now. It's sort of thinking about things a little bit more deeply at times.
We have got a radio and television station ready and give it to you. They train you how to speak, how to operate, how to broadcast it.
It's fantastic that it gives volunteers the opportunity to put something back into the community, and it's obviously an opportunity for the community to get something from the radio station.
It's fun. You get into the process, you become a content creator, which is very important because you can become very unfulfilled if you're only a consumer. If you're only a consumer, it really doesn't feel like you're contributing too much. You're only just sort of sitting there passively. But once you get out there, once you have an outlet, you suddenly become something else, you are contributing.
Radio Adelaide has in just the last few years had to do it on its own, make another transition into doing it leaner and meaner, and it's fantastic to see that community radio just hangs on. It will survive, and even that pressure is one of the pressures, isn't it? Then you've got the pressure of podcasts and screen time, and that any broadcaster from large to small has had to sort of think through.
We're producing content specifically for podcasts. We're looking more at digital content, looking at more at being a multi-platform media producer rather than just a radio station. It's a necessity now.
You know, it was often said that video killed the radio star, and now people say, oh, podcasting is going to kill the radio star, but I think radio is a very enduring medium, but it does require flexibility, and it does require a moving with the times and changing and adapting all the time. And technology enables that. I suppose one of the big challenges is having the resources to be able to afford all the changing technologies, and also to be included in things like digital spectrums, to be included by government in those policies, rather than be sort of excluded in the process because we're not bringing in the big bucks. I think radio is a very enduring medium, and largely because it's so intimate and so accessible for people, and has a really powerful place in telling stories and connecting people.
You just get the feeling that community broadcasting has enough raison d'etre, has enough meaning that it will just keep coming. People want to make community radio. The community needs community radio, because without that, the thousand flowers don't bloom.
I don't know if I'm the first person to have thought of this phrase, but I think radio is like the cockroach of media. It'll never die, even in like a atomic bomb or whatever. Do you think I was the first person to think of that? I think I have. I think it's a good one.
Presumably.
Yeah.